Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Madvertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of content, creativity, marketing, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Andrew Clark. He is the SEO and Content Strategist at Call Tracking Metrics, where he's driving technical SEO improvements, content strategy, backlink building, and more to enhance traffic and acquisition. Andrew is also the team lead for their podcast, Smart Route, which perhaps one of our team members will appear on in the future. But we have Andrew today. Thank you for coming on and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Adam, for the intro. And yes, everything you said, thank you for nicely encapsulating it. I've been with Call Tracking Metrics since June of 2024. Prior to that, coming out of the agency world where I cut my teeth. It's been kind of a wild journey over the past 10 years, but happy to be on the show and looking forward to this conversation with you.
And before the show, we were talking about our previous guest, Lamar, from a company that's been around 100 years. I actually think it would be helpful because I'm sure some people listening use your product, use Call Tracking Metrics, but a lot of people don't. So it'd be great to hear, what you guys actually do to give some context into the discussion.
Absolutely. So call tracking, which is the bread and butter of Call Tracking Metrics. And just to give a little context of the company itself, it's been around for the better part of a decade at this point, co-founded by Todd and Lori Fisher. And we're headquartered just outside of Annapolis, Maryland. So if anybody's on the East Coast, you probably know where that is. But for those not from the East Coast, it's between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. As you were saying, bread and butter is call tracking software. So digital marketers who have been doing this for a while, this is probably old hat. Stuff like dynamic number insertion on websites, landing pages, really just getting rich data around where phone calls originate, doing that dynamic swapping on a website that's based on whatever channel you're trying to market through. And then having robust reporting to back all that up and see, okay, what type of calls are driving leads for my business? What types of keywords are people mentioning in their phone calls to us? And then, more recently, the technology's been expanding, and a lot of this is not necessarily unique to Call Tracking Metrics, but the wider industry around a thing that conversation intelligence, which is kind of a buzzword that a lot of people are now using in light of the wider AI boom. But really, it can be distilled down to understanding what information is being relayed in people's conversations over a phone, through a lead form, even chats. We have all that under our software. And it's really just about better communicating with your customers, understanding more what they want, and being responsive to it. And I think really at the core of what Call Tracking Metrics is trying to aspire to and always has been is delivering quality customer support and just a quicker way of communicating with people. And that's really the driving mission here. And that's been something I've been trying to do since joining the team is how do we get better quality information out there, knowing that there's a sea of just so much content on the internet and everybody's got an opinion about something. And how do you become that authoritative voice in this space and remain responsive, keep adapting to what your customers want, and trying to just evolve with what else is going on in the wider world. Sorry, go ahead.
I think you guys are interesting because you guys are also basically doing analytics around an offline action, really.
Correct.
And so, we're doing something similar with out of home. We have another partner, Lob, that does direct marketing analytics. And I feel like at this point, like your marketing stack, it's almost there's not much that you do that shouldn't be put into a dashboard for your team to act on and for executives to give visibility, even things that in the past you couldn't track. And at the very least, having some KPIs around it to measure directionally, even if you're not super sophisticated at everything yet, I think it's like really good to at the least start to collect this data. And that's sort of the step one on the way to being really productive with your measurement, the first step is, of course, collecting. So, of course, a lot of companies collect a lot of data and don't do anything
Yes.
with it. So
Right.
that's where a good software stack comes in and starts to make those metrics actually usable for your marketing, for your customer service, for all of this. So I remember years ago when I was at Google, things like click to call in our phones was first implemented, and it started to click for me just how the phone was just going to be another conversion
Mhm.
event for us for all of our marketing. So I'm curious, you mentioned customer support, but you guys also measure actual like marketing results of
Yes.
people calling the business.
Yes, absolutely. Marketing attribution, that is core to us as well. And that's oftentimes what people are coming to us in the first place because, like you were just talking about, that eh, there are where a lot of business owners and a lot of marketing agencies as well, they know they need this information because it helps drive better results from their wider marketing efforts. It's just more informed. Hopefully, it's better tailored to what their end customer actually wants, and not just kind of a shot in the dark. Um, and yeah, I mean, just having that data is a great first step, as you said. However, what I really love about call tracking metrics is we're thinking about how to leverage that data constantly. Because having a sea of it, yeah, you can get lost very quickly. Uh, and then, especially if you're trying to report out to somebody maybe outside the marketing department or outside whatever you're specifically tasked with, it's all about how's that message, what's the story you're trying to tell. And I think we do a good job with our customers to tell compelling stories that are backed up by real data. It's not just fluff.
So I'm curious, for a marketer who's never measured, um, you know, phone tracking, what do you collect, and typically what sort of insights does a
Mhm.
customer get with phone tracking?
Absolutely. So at the very basic level, you're going to see where calls are originating from. So what marketing channels. You're going to see the click information. Uh, we have a lot of customers using it in conjunction with Google Ads, like you mentioned, or other PPC platforms, as well as a lot of organic channels as well. I mean, something that I love seeing is how phone numbers get incorporated into stuff like out of home advertising or all the offline stuff, direct mail, all these old school tactics that, if you really think about it, still there's a compelling reason to include a phone number because some people, that's how they want to communicate with a business. This over reliance on digital, which I think we'll get into a little bit more, is something I'm happy to see is being challenged now. That people are starting to think, okay, we've all been all in on digital for a long time, but there's seismic shifts happening in search, PPC, social. I mean, any way you slice it, digital is changing. And how do you evolve with that? Well, I think a lot of it's going back to your roots. But to get back to the original question about what data is accessible, yes, the phone call itself, understanding where it's originating. Is it coming from a website? Is it coming from an ad? Insert whatever channel, as well as some basic demographic information, which this is that was new to me upon joining the company and seeing the actual software in action. I was really impressed what was being shared through the telecoms themselves. And a lot of it is not anything we're doing. It's actually originating with your cell phone provider. When you sign up for a service, which I know, again, didn't know until joining the company, that there's a lot of information already accessible that way about, my age range and family status and all that is okay. So that's being pulled in as well, if it's successful. And then on top of it, and the stuff that I think a lot of marketers would be excited about nowadays is how does this integrate with stuff like AI? AI is being used elsewhere, but when it comes to call tracking, we're able to leverage all the phone call information, feed it into an AI assistant, which can help us transcribe phone calls at the very least. You're getting those call recordings, so your team can listen back to what was being discussed on a call, but then take it to the next level. Have AI transcribe it for you, extract the most meaningful information, summarize it real quick, and then also you can help uh, qualify your leads, direct the phone calls in the right direction. So there's that IVR, the voice menu setup that can be done through our call tracking through the software. So yeah, there's I would say, just to simplify it, there's kind of two main buckets of why people come to us to get data. It's that customer support element as well as the lead generation. So really all the data you could imagine you would need for those two activities, we're able to provide you with that.
And I would imagine, there's pretty clear use cases for, for everything from sales to in a B2B org to, a e-commerce company trying to make sense of customer feedback. Are there any industries that kind of surprise you really get use out of this tracking?
Yeah, notably the behavioral health industry and other regulated industries. I'm always impressed to see how call tracking gets leveraged, and really the sometimes the life-saving outcomes that stem from using a software like ours. Um, just with behavioral health specifically, we have a number of customers who, prior to signing on with call tracking metrics, really didn't have they didn't have a software solution in place. A lot of it was done manually in terms of how they routed calls. And think about, especially in addiction recovery centers, somebody calling in. That person is likely in a moment of crisis, seeking help immediately, and really having the shortest time possible to get them to the right person on in that center is essential. And it can make all the difference between, does that person actually turn a corner in their life and get help and come out of this, or you know they they're bypassed, and then who knows what happens, and they're just kind of lost into the world. And we see that over and over again with our behavioral health clients, that shortening the time to getting people in the right place, having that intake process as seamless as possible, is just, it's life saving in a lot of cases. And I mean, hearing stories like that come up from our customer success team, like that helps motivate me as an SEO content strategist do better, because I know somebody who's the end user, this makes all the difference to them, and it actually saves people's lives. Um, that's like so different from what I'm used to coming out of agencies, where I'm trying to help sell a product or uh, do something, just drive leads, whatever that means in that context.
No, that's really cool, and I love to hear stories like that. I previously spent some time at a genomics firm and have done a little bit of work in life sciences. So I think when you get to work on clients or users that are making a real impact in the world, it can show the value of things like marketing data. It's not always just about selling. In a lot of
Right.
cases, it's about improving an experience with someone, during a intimate moment or during a
Mhm.
moment where they really needed assistance. So I love that. Um, is there also, are you seeing a lot more use of AI for phone support? Because I feel like I've seen a number of demos where like the AI response when you called was actually really good. And I guess my question with all of these things was always, it the response is great, but can it actually take an action?
Sure.
Like can it solve an issue for me, or do I still have to talk to someone, like trying to get like a credit card fraud removed, or
Hmm.
schedule an appointment? It seems to me like, I still always have to get to a human, and it would be cool if the AI could do the thing for me. So are we there
Yep.
yet, or?
I think we're nearing it, and I can attest to it firsthand because I'm working on that product launch as we speak. It's for us, it's going to be titled Voice AI, and it's an AI assistant, just like you're talking about. So, an example use case that we've seen is with the home service industry. So, people like roofers, plumbers, electricians. Uh, it's proving out to be, it's in beta right now for us. So, I don't have any real hard data to share. I wish I did, but the anecdotal data we are getting back from these people is that they're seeing it as an extension of their business operations team or customer support if they're big enough. Because think about any home service. Ideally, it would be 24/7. You can get appointments booked, people in the pipeline to get the services they need. But the realities of a lot of these businesses, especially at the local level, is they're small operations. They're limited by budget, limited by how many staff members can be tied up answering phone calls. Because in my experience, a lot of like the bigger operations in my area, yeah, they have actual customer support centers that I can call and handle all the bookings. But for the smaller companies, something like a voice AI assistant would allow them to compete more with the bigger guys. Uh, and yeah, it's being used for stuff like off hours, intake of leads. So somebody calls just like you're describing, says, "Hey, I've got an issue at my home," and they relay all the information they would to normally to a human being, maybe during business hours. That voice AI assistant is able to then understand what's being asked, determine, okay, this person's serious. This is the timeline they need help by, and then is already integrated on the back end with stuff like a business's CRM or its appointment booking software, whatever it needs, it's already synced up. And then it can determine and pull that information and have a conversation with a customer and say, yeah, we can book you for next day's service. It'll be with Joe. He'll be out in this time frame. And then that's all done. So it doesn't require a person leaving a message anymore and then maybe getting a call back. And we've actually seen through a home services industry survey we did that yeah, really the responsiveness of a business is essential, and that can make all the difference between somebody saying, yes, I'm going to give you my business, or I'm going to go elsewhere because I need to. um, and I know that from my own lived experience with owning a home. Like, yeah, some things can't wait, and I can't be told it's going to be 2 weeks out. Like, I need that immediate answer, or at least be told, sorry, we can't be there tomorrow. I got to go on to someone else.
Yeah,
So yeah, AI
this
is helping fast track all that.
this is actually a great example because on Monday my heat went out in my home
Oh
in
no,
Austin, and this is like the coldest day of the year, right?
right.
And so I went on like two or three different HVAC specialist
Hmm.
websites, and I filled out I just started calling them, and then one didn't pick up, and I filled out the form,
Yep.
and eventually I called when I got to a person. They're like, "Oh, we can see you in an hour." And then like an hour later, I got a bunch of callbacks. I'm like, "Hey, thanks guys. I already found a solution, but like I
Right.
don't want, my wife and dogs to be
To
freezing,
freeze.
right?"
Yeah.
So for things like that, I think AI would be really cool, and I probably would have
Mhm.
just the first person that I was able to book something with, because we just moved here and there's probably like 12 different HVAC contractors that could have worked on it. So I think like that that speed to market and having a
Yep.
great experience is also marketing, right? It's
Sure.
because you could have a great search ad that's ranks highly and is the right
Yep.
thing, but then if you don't fulfill the ask, you're not actually going to get the business.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's where AI is really going to prove very beneficial to businesses. And a point of kind of reluctance that we've seen from some of the beta testing is just that some businesses, because maybe they're not the people we're working with, maybe you're not marketing people specifically, and maybe they're the business owner themselves, is just having questions around, is this easy to set up? Anytime we bring up AI, sometimes people just, they're like, oh, this is so complicated and whatnot. But as I've seen with call tracking metrics, we do a really good job of trying to think as the customer and making sure our knowledge base is up to date with how do we walk you through setup, and really break it down to be as simple as possible, especially around stuff like writing AI prompts, because there's a lot to consider. And for anybody who has used AI themselves, your outcome only gets better if that prompt on the front end is done right. Just kind of leaving it and be very vague in general is not going to get you great results.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because you're probably at the frontier of actually using AI to do real things for users. What do you think of kind of the state of the marketing sector broadly here? Because I feel like there's companies like yours that are early adopters of like putting
Mhm.
AI into the product. And then there's like a lot of people just in our industry just like saying things about AI is going to, do everything and change everything. And it's kind of this nebulous thing out there. I think it's still more tangible than the metaverse and maybe some of the other things that marketers have done in the past. But I guess
Sure.
what's your take here on AI? Is it can we be too excited? Are people overpromising? Where are you at?
Yeah, I feel like it's some people are overpromising on what AI is going to be able to do. I think for me personally, I've come to use AI as another tool in my tool belt as a marketer. Uh, does it fully replace everything I am doing, especially when it comes to content development? No. There's still tons of research that I'm doing on my own, a lot of creativity that I have to infuse into even drafting content outlines and using AI along the way, or um, leveraging an AI platform to help me with research. I still have to come up with the questions to start. Um, and I think, I'm seeing a lot of people just automate away certain parts of their marketing jobs. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, you're giving up before we even can see what you can come up with as a human being. And like, why not just use AI as another tool? Like, yes, it's a new reality. I feel strongly that marketers have to, and business people in general have to learn how to use AI responsibly, and but at the same time be mindful to not just give away everything to it and say, "I just give up. I surrender. I'm not going to think anymore," and just kind of go that way.
I don't,
Um,
I'm pretty
yeah.
excited for the day AI actually could do our jobs fully because that would mean like with the amount of things we do, if AI gets that good, it's like a
Mhm.
whole new world. Like everyone's gonna have to
Sure.
figure out, what they even do all day, right?
Right.
So I'm actually I think that'd kind of be a cool timeline. Like what does that mean in a world that AI replaces like most people in a company? Like
Mhm.
do we all become YouTubers? Do we all become craftsmen and service
Right.
industry workers? I mean, ultimately it's a question of what are going to be the machine jobs, what are going to be the
Yep.
human jobs. And I'm with you right now. I use AI to do repetitive work or
Yes.
work
Yep.
that like sorting data or coming up with summaries of like if a user gives me like a 20-page document on their sector, I'll just tell the AI, give me as many bullet points as necessary to tell me everything in this and
Right.
summarize it quickly. And it's really useful for a lot of the just boring blocking and tackling things. So
Yes.
for me, it's just like an assistant that never gets
Yep.
tired, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's also great to overcome writer's block at times. I know for myself, when I'm not feeling the most creative, at least I can sit down and have a conversation with an AI tool. And oftentimes that's enough to get me thinking, okay, I'm heading in the right direction. Now I'm going to take it offline and mill it over and figure out what I'm going to do next. Um, and yeah, to your point about alleviating energy going towards repetitive tasks 100%. I mean, I am all for that, because it then frees up time to do the cooler stuff that I got into marketing in the first place to do. Um, and especially now with this role that I'm in, I'm using it as a way to offload time and energy so I can focus on stuff like our podcast and helping collaborate across the company, get involved with other projects like product development, and just offering a different take and reminding people that, like, here's what I'm seeing at the forefront in online platforms that are relevant to the industry, and like having that freedom to do those things where in previous jobs I just didn't have the time or energy to do it because I was so taken up by, oh, I got to produce for a client, I got to get reporting done, I got to do X, Y, and Z things all in like an 8-hour shift. Now I feel like much of that has been taken off my plate, or at least fast tracked in a way that it cuts down on time.
Yep. So we should talk about your podcast.
Sure.
I find this question is like such a great question to ask anyone who
Mhm.
runs a podcast. You obviously get to talk to a lot of smart people. Do you want to share a few things that you like your favorite takeaways so far, either from running it yourself or things guests have said, just some of your favorite anecdotes, stories, whatever you'd like.
Yeah. So just to be clear, I am stepping into this role after the podcast has been running for over 2 years. And I'll actually be recording some new episodes starting this week. We've been on a hiatus, but I obviously have gone back and listened to the whole back catalog. And yeah, the coolest episodes to me have been ones where people aren't hyper focused on necessarily what they do in marketing. I think the guests that bring in their genuine self, these cool life experiences outside of the profession, are the ones that stick with me. And I'm always a big sucker for people's origin stories. Like that's what draws me in and what makes me just want to like ask a million different questions of like, why'd you choose to go this way? You had all these other options. I think about myself of like, how did I get into marketing in the first place as somebody who went to school for the humanities and peace and conflict resolution? Like, I don't think,
I'd like to hear that story.
sure. Yeah, so I was a lifelong humanities guy. I'm a history nerd to my core, unabashed. And yeah, just over the course of going through academia, I'm a child, I'm a millennial, so navigated the whole financial crisis, was graduating undergrad in 2009 and going into a world that was really kind of scary of like, okay, the options before me are only a handful of like, do I move home and live with my parents? That's not terrible. But another option was go on to grad school right away and just kind of wait things out a little bit. And that's what I chose to do. So I actually ended up going on to get a master's, got in peace and conflict resolution, which, you know, probably a lot of people would not understand what that is. It's within the world of international relations with a heavy focus on communication techniques, dialogue specifically, and as implied, conflict resolution. Um, and yeah, a lot of reading and writing, research, all the things that I'm doing currently. So that's been the through line from academia into what I do now. Uh, and also at the same time, I was getting involved with a lot of on campus organizations that were focused on bringing people together from all different backgrounds to talk about somewhat contentious topics. Didn't shy away from politics and all the hot button things that everybody tells you, oh, don't talk about.
Sure.
That's outside of the course of polite society. And I'm like, no, we're gonna go right for it. And I think that helped me be more at ease having conversations with oftentimes people I've never met outside of like maybe a discovery call for the podcast, and just going right into it and like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Like, what are you excited about as well? And um, yeah, that's something I've carried through everything I've done professionally. But yeah, after school, I went to work in federal contracting, lived and breathed that whole world in DC, and just discovered over time that I felt like I hit a wall. And, this was only 2 jobs into my career, and found that I was the youngest person in the room oftentimes and just felt really underutilized and bored, which for anybody that's been in that type of role in the past, I'm sure you can empathize of like motivating yourself to go into an office day in, day out and just feel like, what am I doing here? My brain is rotting away. um, then just over time, it led me to think, okay, what's next? What can I do to get out of this situation? What steps can I take? And I kept coming back to, I want to help build communities. Have this desire to talk to people. There's a creative streak in me too. What professions allow me to do that? So I started taking some online courses through Coursera and was just educating myself about digital marketing. And over time, that led me to make the leap to actually pursue a job. And at the time, again, financial crisis is still happening in the background. So I looked at the US market, specifically DC and other major cities, and just felt like, okay, this is probably too hard to get into. Again, how can I still get into this career? But what are alternative paths that I can take? And I ended up going abroad. So I went abroad to Doha, Qatar for 3 years from 2014 to 2017 and went to work for a media production company that landed the job through having a coffee with the owner of the company and just walked in with a resume and said, "Hey, do you have any openings?" And in that cultural context, that's the way things get done. Uh, there's not that formal HR process of, "Hey, apply here, we'll review things, and then maybe call you." It was really just trying to sell myself and what I could do. And the owner of the company said, "All right, perfect. We have a podcast that's been running, and the person doing it currently is set to leave the country in a week. I need somebody to continue with it. Are you up for it?" And I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Yeah, great. You start tomorrow." So I was handed a microphone and told, "All right, here's the platform you use to record, make it work." And I was responsible for doing all the marketing as well as the production of it. And this is somebody who is maybe 2 weeks into living in a foreign country and had to figure out, who am I going to interview? How am I going to book these guests? And in the context of a country where audio podcasting is not like a known quantity at this point. Um, so I'm trying to sell the concept of podcasting to people who just don't have a lot of familiarity with it. Um, and then after that, it just was kind of going strength to strength of other opportunities present themselves in bigger agencies. So stepped into social media management, then came back to the States in 2017 and worked in different size agencies ever since. And then eventually came here, and this is my first in-house role at a SaaS company.
Nice. That's quite the journey. I also like that you're probably the one who de-escalates problems internally or with your client since you have that
Tried to.
background. They might not know how outgunned they are in terms of your ability to, calm people down and create peace, right?
Yeah, it definitely comes in handy. That is for sure. And again, anybody that's worked in agencies or even now in-house, yes, there's always times where conflict resolution is essential and can really make or break relationships. I've seen that so many times firsthand of just how to deal with an angry client, how to de-escalate it, and for me, it's always been like, okay, I'm okay sucking it up and admitting I'm wrong. And like, that's the first step, but also sometimes just offering to hop on a call and have a conversation with somebody rather than, in my opinion, hide behind an email or just deflect. I'm like, all right, again, I got to go head strong into this and just talk human to human. Um,
Yeah,
I think that goes a long way.
I worry sometimes, not all, I'm not going to make a generalization that all Gen Z is like this, but I definitely have some Gen Z friends where, even some millennial friends where I'll
Mhm.
pick up the phone to call them and they like will hate that I call them. They'll like text
Yep.
me back like why don't you text me? I'm like, we need to have a call face to face, about this,
Yes.
or meet face to face, over coffee.
Right.
And they're actually good about. I'm good about getting them to meet face to face, but some of them, they just hate the phone. And I actually really like audio as a medium.
Mhm.
I feel like for a lot of work, just pure audio, not even having video chat on, is more productive. And
Oh,
we
for
just
sure.
focus on, the thing we need to get through. And I think audio is underrated. I'm actually trying to get my friends to have more phone calls lately
Mm.
because, I left California and live in Texas now. So I have to call a bunch of them. And I find going on a walk and having a
Yep.
conversation, and that's really that's like something you probably, learn in negotiation tactics is walking
Yes.
together. You're creating
Mhm.
that movement together is almost like creating that synchronicity between people. I think I said that right.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. The environment is key. Context is key as well. And yeah, just understanding where somebody might be coming from, trying to all these things should be obvious to us, but oftentimes get lost when in the heat of a moment, emotions run high. And yeah, I to get back to like what I'm doing here at Call Tracking Metrics, I mean, it's another way that I get to live that out day in and day out, because as we're talking about the medium of a phone call itself, there's so many things that are unique to it that cannot be replicated in any other format. Hearing somebody's tone of voice, um, now with video calls, like seeing them over a camera, like all these things that otherwise get left when it's just a pure online transaction through like a DM or an email. So much gets left.
Totally. Well, Andrew, one final question to wrap up.
Sure.
For kids leaving college right now and entering the workforce, you gave your story a bit, but could you give
Mhm.
any like pieces of actionable advice for young people leaving college and entering the workforce to ensure that they have the best chances at success?
Absolutely. I would say I would encourage any new graduates have as many conversations with people in industries that you see yourself going into, get to know them, learn about them, offer to meet up. And I've heard several of your past guests suggest something very similar. Just do the outreach, whether it's going to initially through a DM or on LinkedIn, a cold email, dare I even suggest a phone call? Be persistent and trying to get in touch with people who are further in their career than you and learn from them. And really take the time to be humble and approach it as I'm here to listen and learn. But at the same time, don't be shy about yourself. Even as a graduate, I'm sure you've had cool lived experiences that might be relevant to somebody you're seeking a job from, or um, you want to eventually go work for, but you feel like, all right, I don't possess the skills right now, but I'm going to work on that. And I think also never lose sight of what your passions are, your hobbies are along the way. And this is coming from somebody who did that for a long time, of just sacrificing your personal interests and hobbies for the sake of a career and working long hours and being miserable as a result. Because there's so much that those hobbies and things outside work are going to recharge you. I found they bring a lot of inspiration and just allow me to think creatively without having to solely be focused on something related to my work. Um, and also building those connections with people who knows in the future are going to lead you somewhere really cool. I'm thinking of all the connections I've made over the years through doing stuff like CrossFit. Um, Again, a very excited, engaged community, but think of all the people who go to it. And if those people are of a certain mindset, then that brings me along too. And I'm more motivated and more excited for my life. So, yeah, just keep on doing the things that you're already excited about, because other people are going to see that, and I think they value that because you're optimistic, you're excited about something, you show passion. Seeing passion in people nowadays is kind of a rarity, I feel. um, and something, I think about you wrote about, of just like seeing that in people begets so many other cool things, and the law of attraction will bring other people to you, and who knows what comes of that. I don't know, I'm a perpetual idealist, so I'm a bit biased.
I love that. And especially, I think, especially if you're in marketing in any sort of creative role, you're not going to be able to be creative if you just work. Like you have to have
Yeah.
adventures, you have to travel the world a bit, you have to write or make art, you have to, just do things that spark that creative, impulse in you.
Yeah,
Andrew, this has been great. I'll put some links to your social profiles in the description, but for people who are just listening, where should we go to connect with you?
absolutely. I would encourage anyone who wants to connect, reach out over LinkedIn, type in Andrew Clark, you'll find me under call tracking metrics. You can visit the company page and find me that way too. And yeah, just feel free to write to me. And I'm pretty active on there and happy to have a conversation with whoever does reach out.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, thank you for spending the time today. Definitely learned a lot about call tracking, and we will see everyone on the next episode.